Hello everyone, this is Mr. Speak and I'm here today to talk about Iron Man Armored Adventures, the aptly named Armor Wars. Quick summary of the episode. We pick up where Tony left off last time, where he had just had all the armor specs to the Iron Man armors stolen. And he's been brooding over about it for some time now, and meanwhile he's been spying on both Stain and Hammer. Across town, an incident with a crane occurs, and Iron Man can't get there in time. Of course, War Machine isn't suited up anyway. So, as things are about to go south for everybody under the crane, two new people come out of the woodworks, named Force and Shockwave. Now, one notable thing to note, the one notable thing to say about these guys is, aside from a few armor plates and color schemes, these things are basically knockoffs of the Iron Man armor. I mean, aside from a few powers that we haven't seen before, namely Force seems to have some sort of psionic control and be able to lift up objects out of the air, and Shockwave, like his name says, is able to emit shockwaves from his hand, as well as emit some like weird energy hand and use it to move things around. I know, it's weird. Anyway, Tony confronts them because he obviously knows that they're knockoffs of his armor. He gets a bit of bad publicity when he spars with them a little bit, and then we cut to the next scene. Of course, another incident occurs later that day or later that week. It doesn't really give a clear indication of how time passes. Anyway, later on, another incident occurs with the Maggia where they're robbing a bank, and of course, Force and Shockwave reappear here to stop them. They're having a bit of a tough time, so Iron Man comes in and helps out. He does a lot of the work, but still, Force and Shockwave get most of the credit. By this time, Tony is just clearly fed up, so he uses these things called negator packs, which he invented after the knockoffs appeared, and they totally short out the armor. And after that, we learn something very interesting, though probably not surprising to most of you. The people in the Force and Shockwave armors have been using cheap materials, so they're not as advanced. Well, they're as advanced, but they're not as good as the Iron Man armor itself. Namely, the the voice recognition thing, the main part that stops people from recognizing who it is inside the armor, is not as good. So Pepper was able to recognize their voices and do some little bit of tracking. Turns out they're two criminals that were formerly associated with the Maggia. And after that, we get something shocking from Tony, is that he says he's going to reveal his secret identity. What he means by this, we find out later on. Anyway, meanwhile, Stain has been marketing the two heroes, which he calls the Guardsmen, as the new heroes instead of the Iron Man, which he bashes for his attack on them earlier. So, and he plans to hold the expo forum later on that week. So we cut to the expo, and we finally learn what Tony was talking about. He finally realizes it's not about his inventions, it's not about his vengeance against Hammer and Stain, and it's about saving people. Anyway, he calls out the Guardsmen, who have now acquired a new member called Firepower, a really obvious knockoff of the Hulkbuster prototype armor, or just the Hulkbuster armor in this series, I suppose. Anyway, he calls them out, saying he will reveal his identity if they reveal theirs. Now, naturally, being criminals inside those suits, they can't do that. So the first thing to do is attack Iron Man. Iron Man has a tough time until War Machine comes along. War Machine and Iron Man are able to hold their own, but they're still getting pretty beat up thanks to the Hulkbuster armor. However, thanks to Tony's knowledge of the armor and again cheap materials, he's able to disable the Hulkbuster armor with a little knowledge of its weak points. And the other two surrender shortly afterwards because their biggest gun has gone down. Not before Firepower accidentally almost caused an incident with Stark International by blowing up their building, but that's beside the point. Anyway, we kind of end this episode a light note with Tony in that he's finally seeing his purpose. His friendship is not really that damaged. We've seen how strong it is. However, it ends on a bad note as far as Stain is concerned. Even though Stain has taken some heat over this incident, the board is still enthralled, and they're even considering keeping him in even when Tony becomes of age to take over the company. Also, we learned that the guardsmen were just things that they want to do to work the kinks out of the armor that they invented. And he's working on a even bigger project, as we know, the Ironmonger. One notable thing about this Ironmonger, if you would compare it to the Hulkbuster armor, it would probably stand at least twice as tall. We don't get a full size shot, but it definitely is a lot bigger than anything we've seen before. And it's even bigger than some of the incarnations in the comic books, so that's something unique. Okay, and that's it on the episode. However, some notable things about it is, A, we see the Negator packs. We see, he's a bit upset, but he comes to terms with it relatively fast, and his friendship doesn't really suffer. His friendship and relationships don't really suffer because of his anger over the whole situation. He gets over it rather quickly. Another notable thing is we kind of see the Tony Pepper relationship skyrocket in this episode, in that we definitely see that there's something there before Tony goes off and saves the day. Even though it even came up, the little moment that they had where it's like, why don't you kiss me, coming from Pepper. So we definitely see that there's something there on that note. Will Will anything else come from it? Hopefully so, because usually in the comic books, their relationship does not always go well. Hopefully we finally get to see them have a happy resolution as far as that go. Anyway, we see somewhat other of Stain's, designs. We see some of the other stuff that he's designed. Notable that the guardsmen, while being knockoffs, obvious knockoffs, and again, a few armor plates and color schemes, they do have abilities that are not present, or at least to our knowledge, not present within the original Iron Man armor. As for the Hulkbuster armor knockoff, the only thing really big difference was the big gun that they mounted on his shoulder that almost destroyed Stark International. So that's nothing really notable. Outlook for the series, we're definitely seeing it taking a darker turn. Things are, looking up as far as relationship goes. He's not digging himself into a deeper hole as far as that goes. But then again, comic book Tony had a lot more to worry about. And another notable thing is that even though it's taking the darker turn, the relationships are staying intact. However, we definitely see it taking that darker turn. Things aren't getting better. The guardsmen were only created to work the kinks out of the specs they got and all the additional weaponry and stuff like that. But things are still going south. Stain's cooking up an even more massive and more powerful weapon for Tony to fight, or at least to sell, which either way is not very good for him. Anyway, the next episode is going to be called Line of Fire, and it's going to have something to do with Hammer, the Black Panther, and a new character that Hammer has created from his take on the specs. Anyway, this has been Mr. Speak on Iron Man Armored Adventures, signing off.